Welcome to Bitcoin Original Gangster, the show that takes no shit when it comes to SegWit. We are the OGs and we will be defending Bitcoin gangster style. We'll be shooting from the hip and exposing the shit in shitcoins. The idea of this show is that you ask us your questions on crypto and we will tell you all that we know. And on that note, let's get the disclaimers out of the way. So all the opinions that you hear on this show are opinions and must only be taken as opinion and never taken as any form of advice, family, financial, sexual or otherwise. And on that note, let's rock and roll. There we go. Mate, I'm loving the purple background you've got there.
Thank you.
Mate, it looks good. It adds to your complexion.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, so we had to rearrange because my office became Ronan's nursery.
Right, so, yeah, I was going to say, you've got some interesting furniture around on the wall.
Absolutely, right. And if you do the background here, let's see. Like if you change colors.
Oh wow,
like
yeah.
I get very weird very quickly, but but yeah. There we go.
That looks really good. So have you just been on another call?
Always. So my mornings, I work in cybersecurity. So
oh, right.
We have like a morning stand-up meeting where we discuss what the hell we're tackling today, and then my meeting, I had to get bumped into the next meeting too because basically, like while everybody else is scrambling, we're slammed because of all of the people that are working from home, but we're not prepared to do so. So we're trying to re-secure a bunch of very insecure environments right now.
Wow,
so
yeah.
It's been crazy. Yeah.
I didn't realize that you worked in cybersecurity. I'm wondering how I could not have known that before.
You know what? I don't talk about it a whole lot. It's not exactly a secret either, but primarily when I'm talking with Bitcoin people, I talk about my Bitcoin stuff because I also am a partner in a Bitcoin business and everything else. But yeah, my other job,
your weekend job
is. Yeah, pretty much. It's funny because I don't actually do any one thing full time. So when people are like, "Hey, what do you do?" It's like, "Well, how long do you have?"
Oh, kind of like a jack of all trades.
Something like that, yeah.
Oh. So can you? I mean, I'm sure you've probably told a million people this already, but just for those who might be watching this show for the first time, can you just tell everybody how you found Bitcoin?
Yes. So in 2012, I was a partner in a printing company. And I had some friends. I was also a big libertarian activist. I was a big gold bug. And I had some friends that I knew, some casual acquaintances more so, ask if I'd be willing to accept Bitcoin for payment for doing a small project, for doing like some posters for a protest.
All right.
At the time, Bitcoin was probably $50 a coin or something like that. I was like, yeah, sure, what the heck. It was a small job. It was probably only like $100 was the value of the job anyway. So I was just kind of like, yeah, whatever. But I assumed it was some stupid video game token or something because my libertarian friends at the time were crazy, much like they are today. But they paid me in Bitcoin, and then I let it sit for a little while. I didn't really think much of it. And then I started to get into more and more like discussions and debates about it on like Facebook. And so then I was like, okay, I need to educate myself, and started to get real involved in like mid 2013. But I've been a long timer.
Yeah. So I mean, whenever I hear someone like yourself that says, "Wow, I got into Bitcoin in sort of 2012," I kind of like half expect you to be a little bit like Roger Ver, kind of like, well, I mean, financially free, traveling the world, selling and preaching the delights of cryptocurrency.
Sure. I mean, it's funny. I mean, had I been a bigger, badder investor real early, I probably would be. I'm not going to say I'm not. I'm certainly comfortable, but I'm not a Roger Ver type by any means. I also had in 2014, so in late 2013, bridging into 2014, me and a couple buddies were working on setting up a small mining operation, and we were going to build an SPV wallet of all things.
Wow.
And I ended up getting scammed out of, like, one of the partners ended up disappearing and stole a bunch of Bitcoin from us.
No way. He didn't go on to set up a Quadriga, did he?
No, not to my knowledge. As far as I know, he ended up somewhere in Southern Europe. I don't recall if it was Spain or Italy, or it was somewhere. It's been a while now, but
Right.
at the time, like, going out and filling out police reports and stuff, like, the cops are like, people didn't know what they didn't know the word Bitcoin, and then when I explained it to them, they're like, so, essentially video game tokens. What the hell are you talking about? So it went nowhere. I basically wrote it off, and it was right around when I met met the woman who became my wife.
Right.
So I was distracted with other things at the time too. So I basically took a good shot in the shorts as far as the finance stuff goes. But I was still involved in Bitcoin. I just sort of took a little bit of a breather in like 2014, but I was still kind of accumulating, and I would do business in Bitcoin when appropriate. But I was never that guy who was like, you know what, I put 50 grand in when Bitcoin was $100 and now I'm rich. So that's not my story.
Yeah, I mean, do you know, whenever I do think about this, I mean, I'm still pretty gobsmacked at the fact that Bitcoin started in 2009 from literally nothing, and then by 2012, in just 3 years, it had gone from nothing to whatever it was, like $50.
Yeah, $50, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, that is still absolutely staggering. Like, absolutely staggering when you think about it. And now I look back and I think, wow, we're kind of like almost like getting in there at those prices now. I sometimes have to pinch myself, but
for sure.
But I mean, obviously it was. I mean, there's no way that I would have had the knowledge back then that I have now. And what kind of makes me laugh is that Roger Ver was saying, oh yeah, I was a millionaire before I got into Bitcoin, and I put like 25 grand in, and I'm just like, mate, you're a millionaire and you're bragging about putting 25 grand in. Right. Let's work out your percentages compared to mine. Yep. You ain't got nothing on me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's funny because I'm very conservative. Like, I've always been. I'm a low debt guy. In fact, I've never had personal debt. I have had business debts because I've been in business for a long time, but all of it was always allocated into, like, I will take out loan money in order to build this profitable business. But personally, I mean, I haven't had a personal credit card. I'm 34 years old. I've not had a personal credit card aside from like pretty small car loans, which I always pay off. I have basically no debt. So for me to invest a big chunk of money into Bitcoin, like, I've always kind of handled it the same way. And I have this axiom that I've used for a long time, like, invest your beer money, not your rent money.
Yes.
And
very wise.
And that's how I've treated it. So, for portions of my life, that's $50 a week, and granted, I'm better off now, but, $50 a week isn't exactly going to translate into me, having a private jet or anything like that either. So.
Well, it might do in the future.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, well, being not quite there yet. I mean, if you consider that it was like went from zero, to $50, and we're not talking like 0 to 50 pence, which would be huge if we were talking about an increase in the share price. We're talking like 0 to $50, in 3 years, which is just absolutely staggering. But again, I think, I mean, this is what I'm sort of like trying to explain to a lot of people, in the fact that Bitcoin was designed to absolutely rocket up in value, because the investors in Bitcoin, as in like the miners, are expected to use that money to build the network on everyone else's behalf. They have to be loaded because they have to have the incentive to be. And so again, I mean, they're going to be more profitable, but if they want to be more profitable, it means more investment. So therefore, they should be willing to do it, because if they got into Bitcoin relatively early, it means they're relatively smart, because that means they would have understood the white paper, they would have been technically savvy, And then they should be able to work out the maths. They're just like, well, actually, if we invest this, I mean, the return isn't as much as what we're getting right now, but if we don't invest, we get nothing. So it's kind of like they're sort of like being squeezed, but it's still they're financially incentivized enough because of the increase in the price of Bitcoin to grow the network for everybody.
Absolutely. No, I mean it's a beautiful model. It's a beautiful, I dare I say a perfect model, because perfection. Well, perfection is one of those complicated things, right? Where you look at it and say, well, can we tailor the perfect economy? And that's something that I think that's something we're seeing a lot of attempts at, especially in the last couple of weeks now, with all the geniuses out in their suits talking about how to make it perfect. And Bitcoin, Bitcoin is so different in that it really takes a pure free market model of incentives, and it demands that we all compete, and our complete rational self-interest and competition to be the center of the network is the thing that makes it secure. It's the thing that makes it perfect. So its perfection rises out of its chaos, and that's a truly perfect model. It's incredible.
Yeah. See, I know that Satoshi has worked all of this out, because that a lot of people seem to think that the white paper was some kind of like gung ho business plan written by written by a fairly reckless entrepreneur on the back of a fag packet, that made a few mistakes that needs changing. Whereas it's not. It's an academic piece of literature, and in academia you do not publish anything that is wrong, because you only get one choice. You only get one shot if you're an academic. You will be shunned and frowned upon for releasing inaccurate work if you were to do such a thing, without research. And I think that's what so many people don't get, which is why they're should we say effing around with the protocol, thinking that it needs to be changed, when it doesn't. But I'm not particularly techie. I'm more from the monetary side. But the one thing that does fascinate me is how Bitcoin has been designed purposely to shoot up in value, and it's the price effectively that does the marketing for it on its behalf. It's designed to absolutely shoot up. I mean, he could have had a huge supply and been a bit like XRP, where people are sort of scrabbling around for pennies. It's gone from 1p to 2p to 12p. It's just like, okay, well done. That's not particularly exciting, but being digital, he could have structured this any way he wanted whatsoever. So I would love to kind of like reach into his mind and say, right, how has he worked this out? But I'm assuming that he's used the sort of Fibonacci sequence of expansion in this.
Sure.
With the number 21. I don't in relation to maybe the number of people in the economy, or maybe the size of the economy, or I suppose the size of global trade. But he's done something to figure it out, where it seems to be almost perfect. Like it's not rocketed up where people have been like, oh wow, that number's far too high. I don't want to get in now. I'll just leave it. But he's sort of like he's had a look at the population and the size of global trade and thought, actually, what? This is where we get the optimum. I suppose the optimum form of advertising, where people are thinking, well, it's going to go up a lot, but it's not going to go up too much, where people are thinking it's absolutely insane, and also, if the price went up too high, too fast, people would be using minute amounts, which wouldn't really get them excited. You need to balance the increase in the price with the increase of usage, so that it sort of like dangles the carrot to those people who haven't got in yet. Whereas, if the price was too high, people would be like, it's 2 million quid already. I've sort of like missed the boat.
Sure.
And then obviously the amount of sats they would be using would just be an insane amount. So I think he's balanced it perfectly. Have you got any thoughts on that yourself?
If I recall, I don't remember if it was spoken or if it was written. I remember reading something Craig wrote about the number being somewhat arbitrary, that it was Yeah, I wish I could recall, because this was probably about a year ago, and he just sort of said that it was not that it was one of the only things that stood out as like a technical thing, something to do with basically computer math, like the way that binary works. Uh, Shoot, I wish I could recall, but but there's that beauty to it too, and I think we've seen that a little bit. I've written quite a bit about sort of sacred patterns and sacred geometry, sacred numbers, that kind of thing, and how it pertains to Bitcoin, and how, like I said before, Bitcoin is chaos, but it's also, I mean, that's what makes it perfect, right? So imagine finding perfection in chaos. It really is about your it's about your point of view, right? So we can't see the beauty in an atom unless we can see it through a microscope, and we can't see the beauty of a galaxy unless we see it from really, really far away, and we're able to pick the right zoom. And I think it's the same with the Bitcoin economy. Craig has talked about the mandala shape of the network when it's drawing a graph properly. And now we've seen, just in the last maybe half a year, this 21E8 thing that pops up on social media. Guys like Mark Wilcox, for example, talking about the magic numbers, and again, it's a 21, right? And so there is like beauty in patterns, and people love this stuff too. Like, you see all the people that are obsessed with hand gestures that they see the elites giving, or if you add those numbers up, it adds up to 333, which is a sacred symbol that the Freemasons use, and Illuminati confirmed, right? So there's those things that we look for, and you mentioned Fibonacci, and I think we inherently, like, somewhere deep down, we were programmed to look for those shapes and patterns and numbers and find them significant. And whether that's programmed by an intelligent designer, or if for some reason it's like the rhythm of reality demands that we see it that way, I think is irrelevant, because we all do see it that way. Like, we fundamentally agree on what is beautiful versus what is profane, or whatever, in a very basic sense. Obviously there's a spread of opinions on some of those things, but by and large, we look at these things the same. So I think Bitcoin is sacred, and it may have been designed that way on purpose, or it may have been a little bit accidental, because it was simply treated as such a chaotic, simple economic experiment.
Well,
so
I would say that nothing has been left to chance in Bitcoin. Absolutely nothing. The designer knew everything, and like, even so, the number I didn't realize how significant the number 21 was in maths until I actually started doing some digging on it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like how plants expand and everything else. It's all related to the number 21. And also, just kind of like on a bit of a romantic note, when I looked up the meaning of the number 21 in ancient Sanskrit, it translates to joy given.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and I thought to myself, maybe that's why Satoshi doesn't want anybody to know, because it's going to reveal his soft side.
Can't have that.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, so why'd you choose 21? Oh, I don't know. I just felt like it. It's like, oh, you're a softie, really, aren't you?
Whatever. Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the beauty of it too. Is there's so much, cloak and dagger, smoke and mirrors, and sleight of hand, and it's like Satoshi very clearly didn't want to be known. I mean, he clearly didn't want to be a public figure.
Did he read my article on Bitcoin? Why Satoshi Nakamoto?
I haven't yet. You sent me a few things right when the virus started to pick up, and I've been working in an incredible amount of time, which is why I've actually been quiet. I haven't written an article or done another video in a good while. So I will get to it when I have some free time. I just don't know when that free time is going to start at this point.
Oh, that's all right. Well, do you want me to save you the time of reading it and explain it?
I'd love to hear it. Absolutely.
Okay, so basically the article says that if a currency has a centralized starting point, it basically means that anyone can start it anywhere at any time, and if that's the case, it just means that there is an infinite supply of cryptocurrency. And if there's an infinite supply of cryptocurrency, it basically means that they have no value whatsoever. So the question is, the paradox is, how do you give something of value, like a cryptocurrency value, when it's the very start point that means it shouldn't have one? Yeah, and so this is why he used the name Satoshi Nakamoto, because he had to decentralize the starting point of Bitcoin. So this is how he decentralized it. So he wrote the paper in English and released it to the Western world, but he distanced himself from that as much as he could by giving himself a Japanese pseudonym. So not only is Japan the furthest country away from the Western world, it is also politically neutral, technologically advanced, and highly developed. So if he had used let's say, for example, a Russian name or a Chinese name, people would have suspected his political agenda. If he used a name from a third world country, people would have questioned, his credibility. Whereas Japan is a relatively insular country as well. So, and not many people speak the language. So it basically gave him the best chance of not being discovered. Because if he had been discovered, it would have completely floored Bitcoin. Because what gives Bitcoin its fundamental value is the fact that the network has been able to grow for a period of 10 years without any central point of authority. It was absolutely essential that he stepped away from the project and was not found. Yeah, and that's what many people don't get. So that's why he had to stay hidden effectively. Now he can come out, because if, let's say, for example, I like to give the example of Ethereum. So, Vitalik created Ethereum. They got hacked. He rolled back the chain. Distributed the Ethereum to everyone else, and everyone's happy because they got their money back and whatnot. But that proves that the chain is centralized. So therefore, Vitalik has not created anything that the Chinese government and the American government could just simply create themselves. So if China created their own Ethereum, they would just insist that all their citizens use it, and their cryptocurrency would very quickly take on the market cap of their GDP, which is like $12.5 trillion. But it's got no fundamental value because America would just simply never use it through sheer political policy. And it's same vice versa. If America created a coin, China would never use it. So it's that very start point that discredits it. Again, these people don't get it. JP Morgan coin, absolutely insane. Stupidest idea ever. And these guys are meant to be titans of the financial industry. Facebook, again, Mark Zuckerberg, coming from Harvard, when meant to be one of the brightest minds, hasn't figured it out that if anything has a centralized starting point, it's got no fundamental value. Can you imagine Goldman Sachs using JP Morgan coin? Do you know what I mean?
It's true. No, and that really is the beauty of it, is that, you look at every other project, and there's that lightning rod person who just by the fact that people like to look for a hero, just like they like to look for sacred shapes and things. Like, we also have this sort of hero archetype that we obsess over, and we know who that is with every project, right? You say Litecoin and you immediately picture Charlie Lee.
Yep.
Or you say Ethereum and you picture Vitalik Buterin or Charles, or even something, like a mid-cap coin. Like, you got something like Dash, and you immediately you can say, like, oh, that was Evan Duffield's project, and blah, 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 blah. And it goes on and on and on. And it's fascinating that Bitcoin is so unique in that way, as a way to as like a security feature, essentially. But yeah, it is. It's that perfect chaotic balance. And when I say chaotic, look how much argument we've had over, who is Satoshi, or is Satoshi real, or was Satoshi a team, or is it, blah, 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 blah. And that's that chaos, again, is part of that security feature, where nobody can quite take it over and push it around. And we've obviously seen the attempts. We have a number of chains that are Bitcoin in name only, but it's a hell of an experiment. It really is an incredible experiment on all kinds of things. Everything from just human sociology to like behavioral anthropology and everything else. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, because Satoshi used a pseudonym, I think that's where sort of Roger Ver was getting really excited, thinking, "All right, yeah, it's anonymous money. Yeah, we can do what we want." Satoshi never wanted to be found, but they don't realize that Satoshi not being found was fundamental to the currency having credibility. You know, because he's stupid, to put it mildly, and he's proved himself to be stupid over these last few years.
Yeah, Roger. I have such a mixed set of emotions about Roger as a human being, because like I think in his heart he's a good person. Like he clearly views himself as a good person, and I think he intends to be, but he's just like everybody else. Like the people that actually I'm going to quote Ronald Reagan, which is neither an endorsement or a criticism, but he has this quote where he says the more the plans fail, the more the planners plan. Or maybe it's the other way around, but the point is that you get these people who think that maybe they're a little bit smarter or a little bit better than everybody else, and that they can plan the lives of other people better than they can be planned themselves, or through the chaos rather. And Roger's one of those people, and he thinks he is an advocate for libertarian thought, and that's fine. It's very easy to be an anarcho-capitalist when the chips are not down. But every time there's been like a hard inflection point or actual pressure put on that view, we see Roger start to play puppet master a little bit, and it's a big reason. It's a big reason why I was very much pro BSV. I was actually neutral in the hash war. I preferred BSV, or the SV roadmap at the time that was going to be Bitcoin Cash, but it was funny. Like it really soured me. Like when I heard about the checkpoints, the rolling deep reorganization protection, and
colluding
the fact
with the
that
exchanges.
Yeah, colluding with exchanges that Roger is a significant investor and/or partner in, and so we saw Roger, who's this believer in the free market and all these things. Like he's allegedly this libertarian maximalist, and when the chips are down in what was essentially an election, he went and basically used Bitcoin ABC as closed source software to play his own game with an ace up his sleeve. And he manipulated everybody. He used his influence to manipulate essentially the entire Bitcoin culture, at least the big block Bitcoin culture, into believing that that one thing happened when actually another thing happened. And so that really made me take a step back and say, like, wow, I respected Roger's idealism until the hash war, or probably a day or two after, and I realized, like, what, he's not principled, and that was hard for me, because early in my Bitcoin journey, it was videos of Roger Ver. The famous one where the meme of him crying comes from was a documentary in like 2014 or 15. And I remember watching that, was really moved by that documentary, and then a bunch of just YouTube content and stuff. I really liked Roger, so it was like a weird breakup when I had to say, like, what, he's just wrong, and he's not wrong by accident. He's wrong on purpose. He did the wrong thing, within full knowledge of doing the wrong thing. He did it anyways because he put the egotistical part of his ideology in front of the philosophical stuff that he claims to be so so obsessed with, or that has such import to him. So it was a weird time, but yeah, I've lost quite a bit of respect for Roger after sort of seeing that veil pulled back.
Yeah. Well, there's two things that immediately jumped out at me that made me think this guy's a fool, like a complete fool. And that is, one, adding anonymity to transactions. Like, one of the reasons I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin is because it's a tool that facilitates and accelerates trade. Whereas at the moment the world is using a medium of exchange that is inflated into infinity, and so businesses are therefore constantly fighting an uphill battle, because not only is I suppose just a made up interest rate put on the money in order to make it circulate, to give it velocity, you're also dealing with its devaluation. So businesses can go bust really quickly. Whereas imagine if a business had been running for years and years and years, and they were doing all their business in Bitcoin and keeping their profits in Bitcoin, and those profits were increasing in value over time. If there was an economic bump in the road, they would have the resources to be able to deal with it. Because it's deflationary. Whereas because we're using an inflationary one, businesses can go bust within a week. Businesses that have been around for years and years and years can just literally crumble. And that's because of currency. And so that's why I was just like, look, there is issue with money here, and I saw that Bitcoin solved this. And then when Roger was going, oh yeah, we need something that's anonymous, I was just like, well, hold on a minute, I'm in this for business, and something that's fundamental to being useful in business is having protection in the trade, legal recourse.
Right.
So if a dispute arises in the trade, so the medium of exchange is always sent first, and then you expect the good or service in return. And if you don't get that good or service in return, then you cannot invoke martial law and put a gun to somebody's head and say, right, give me that back, because obviously that's illegal. You have to rely on the laws of the country to either enforce that trade or for you to get your money back. So the first thing you have to do is prove that you have reasonable expectation of that good or service in the first place. And reasonable expectation is sending the medium of exchange. And then secondly, proving that is exactly what you've done. If the transaction is anonymous, you cannot prove that you've sent it, and they can't even prove that they've received it from you. You do not have a leg to stand on. So now it's just like, if you add any sorts of anonymity whatsoever, that immediately rules out global trade, and international commerce straight away. And I was just like, this is so stupid. How can you not see this? Legal protection is absolutely essential. But then also when it comes to anonymity, anonymity leads to a centralized system. And he's going, it's got to be anonymous to be free. Well, actually, if it's got to be free, it's got to be decentralized. And you can't have decentralization in an anonymous system, because whoever created that system has put the anonymity in there, which means that they are no longer accountable to anyone, because nobody can see what they're doing. So that means they control the system. So that means the system is centralized. Any anonymous system is centralized. But so let's say if you did have a system that was created by someone or something, a central point of authority, which they all were, if that central point of authority is accountable to someone else in the system, who cares if it's centralized? Because you can see what they're doing. Everybody is accountable to someone.
Right.
So therefore the system is fair. There's nobody doing anything that's unreasonable or illegal or immoral, behind the scenes and messing around with the system. And this is what people don't recognize about BTC and SegWit. That is exactly what SegWit allows. So whoever it was, and I was thinking, if ever I have a chat with Tony Vase or someone like that, and I'll be like, so let's talk about SegWit, and I'll be like, who implemented it? Well, I don't know. Well, somebody must have had the idea first. So that idea got rolled out from a centralized starting point. And they now have control of that system, because segregated witness means that the signatures cannot validate transactions on the chain.
Yeah. I know the programmer is Peter. I don't know how you pronounce his name, actually. It's maybe Wheel or Willie. But he goes by Sipa on GitHub as well. But he's a known guy. He's a Blockstream employee. But he coded it up. But I don't know if it was his idea per se. But I mean, either way, it's a bonkers idea. Just like the Cash Shuffle and Cash Fusion is on Bitcoin Cash as well. But for all the reasons you just said, all I can do is give you a here.
Yeah,
so
no,
you're absolutely right. It breaks it as a business tool.
Oh yeah, totally.
And I think it's funny too, because like Roger is so obsessed with this use as a means of exchange use case, but he's so like grocery stores and coffee shops and like it's all this like not to say it's bad, it's not bad, but it's
petty.
It's such a weird, it's petty, it really is. It's such a weird thing to be so utterly obsessed with, like this sort of mom and pop up to like mid-sized, like, upper middle class business owner type of enterprise, like, and then anything above it, like data services and all that is absurd, and social media is nuts, and they've turned into the other small blockchain basically.
Yeah,
You're
they have.
just spamming. BSV is just a bunch of spam, and
Well, see,
it's just such a weird
this
thing.
is also where Roger is stupid, and that's the only word I've got for him. Absolutely stupid, because he hasn't had any forward thinking. He seems to think that it's that when the people will rise up, and the people will then take over government, and the people will get what they want. But what he's not taking into account is corporations. It's corporations that run the world. Governments will not go up against corporations, because corporations keep the population employed and they prevent chaos. Corporations allow people to put food on the table, pay the bills, and have a roof over their head. So it's corporations first. When a corporation starts using something and adopts it, everybody else follows. And this is what he hasn't thought of. So this is why he's going around trying to get as many people on board. He's just like, yeah, it's going to be the population. It's just like, no, mate, it's corporates first. It's corporates first, then the people. Well, and then probably the government. Because it's kind of like, you imagine, a corporation using Bitcoin saving millions, if not billions of dollars on efficiencies, economies of scale, and data storage, and conducting business. And then a government saying, oh, you can't use that. The corporations love money more than anything else, because they want to keep their shareholders happy. That's the only thing they're accountable to. So you've got something that is not illegal, that enables the facilitation of trade and makes corporations more profitable, which means more taxes. You imagine a government saying you can't use that. They'd be like, yeah, all right. Because it won't be just one corporation using it. It will be all the corporations together.
Right.
And they'll be like, well, who do you think pays for your political campaigns, and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
It's genuinely useful. So again, this is what Roger is narrow-minded, small-minded as well, just hasn't foreseen.
Yeah, well, he can't get past his own ideology. And it's funny because, like, that can be a good thing in some circumstances, but he's such a bitter ideologue that he can't get out of his own way, and that's the real problem when you build your worldview first around he's starting with the end goal in mind, and the end goal is this sort of ANCAP utopia, but he doesn't have any of those middle steps filled in, so he's just basically playing jazz, and it doesn't sound very good, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what also doesn't sound very good. In the article that I've sent you on reasonable expectation, I've also written a bit about the Lightning Network in there. And so basically, if data is not going through the chain, which is not on Lightning Network, then it is not immutable, and it can just simply be deleted. So therefore, when it goes through a third party on the Lightning Network, unless that third party is a money service business and has a money transmitter license, that data that they're transferring from one party to another is not legally recognized. So therefore, it carries no value. So therefore, it falls back to reasonable expectation. If you go to court and say, look, I paid this, I sent this medium of exchange, and therefore I expected this good or service in return, the court is going to say, well, does that medium of exchange that you sent across, represent the true value of the good or service that you expected in return? If it's not, if it's sent by something that is not that doesn't hold a money transmitter license, it's not recognised by law as having any value whatsoever, because it's no different from an email. So you've not got a leg to stand on. It's absolutely ridiculous when you look at the basics. And so this is kind of like one of the reasons why I thought I'd have a chat with you, because it's like having all this stuff. I was just like, how is it that BSV doesn't seem to be winning these arguments or debates that they've had, in the past? Because like you and Connor did such a fantastic job with that Hotep debate, but then basically everything that you guys were saying there was no way that Hotep had the intellectual capacity to understand it all. I mean, to be honest with you, it even blew me away. I kind of like wanted to be in that debate, but when you guys were putting all your points forward, I was just like, oh my God, these guys are absolutely fantastic. Far more in depth than I could ever put across. But Hotep didn't get it because it just went straight over his head.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, well, I also think he has a little bit of a financial stake in not getting it. Like he's a partner in some kind of BTC app. So like
surprise, surprise.
Right. So it's he's not entirely unbiased. This curious fellow who just wants to learn about Bitcoin. But nonetheless, it's funny when you go into a debate. I always say the goal is not to convince the person on the other side of the coin. It's to convince the audience. So, I want the audience to listen and be like, oh, okay, well that's the rational argument, or at least that's the argument that I can understand better. And I mean, it's so clear because BSV, first of all, is Bitcoin, which is simple. Like it works simply. In some ways it's complex, but that's the stuff that people don't need to worry about. It's the same way that your cell phone is complex. Like an iPhone is complex if you get past the screen, but the interface is very consumable. It's very discoverable. And Bitcoin's the same way. And the small blockers have spent 5-6 years now just adding layers of exponential complication, and they think that makes them smarter because they're computer scientists. And it's just like any company. And in fact, there aren't a lot of companies that are run by computer scientists because computer scientists don't understand people. They understand computers. And it makes them pretty incapable of designing something that people want to use because they're thinking about what pleases them, and what pleases them is bizarre abstractions. And I think that's a lot what we've seen BTC become. Is it's become a very bizarre abstraction of Bitcoin. And ultimately, I think it's to their detriment, and we're seeing that. We're 2.5 years out from the last time BTC was like a fundamentally bullish asset, and that's their whole use case. That's their whole worldview. And now we're 50 days out, or maybe even less, 45 days out from the BTC halvening. And I mean, they were supposed to all be rich and famous now, and they've done nothing but lose money since December 2017 now. So we're going on 28 months straight of, oh man, I'm poorer than I was almost at the previous halvening. So their use case, their worldview is really coming down hard. And it's funny because now we're standing at the precipice of this worldwide economic monetary collapse. And this is supposed to be their event. I mean, if BTC doesn't go absolutely bonkers exponential in the year 2020, they're done. Their fairy tale is shut and closed. Like, I mean, we should get hyperinflation out of this economic environment. I believe the US dollar is going to lose a massive amount of purchasing power over the next 12 to 18 months. And if BTC is not, $50,000 or $100,000 per coin, in that same amount of time, they're done. Their whole narrative is absolutely 100% donezo. Everybody will be burning Safe Dean's book in the streets, or everybody that bought it anyways.
Safe Gains, but what's that?
What is it? The Bitcoin standard? Safe Dean Amu? Do you know him?
Oh, no. Tell me a bit more.
He is he's actually like some kind of tenured Austrian economist. He's actually the guy who replaced Daniel Krawitz at the Nakamoto Institute about 5 years ago now. So Daniel was old friends with Pierre Rochard and a couple other guys that are basically just BTC lightning boys. And they created this sort of think tank called the Nakamoto Institute. And it was this collection of everything that Satoshi ever said. And then a lot of thoughtful editorializing about it, and and when I say most, I mean like 90% of the thought leadership that came out of the Nakamoto Institute was Daniel Kraywitz, and he
Right.
wrote all of these axioms, like a lot of the things that people say, the digital gold narrative and stuff like that is actually comes from an article by Daniel Kraywitz from about 5 years ago, and they've perverted what he was saying about it. But it's a very long tail conversation. But either way, Daniel was very much a big block advocate early. He believed in on-chain scaling and everything else. So
Yeah.
naturally, the small blockers sort of edged him out of the Nakamoto Institute, and he was replaced by a guy. I believe he's Turkish, and his name is Saifdin Amu or Amus or something like that.
Mm.
And he wrote the book that all the small blockers read, and it's called the Bitcoin Standard. And I've read it, and I don't think it's that great as an Austrian economics book or a Bitcoin book. But the funny thing is, at about 75% of the book, basically just reads it's like a rehashing of basic, like, it's like Ludwig von Mises level 100, and then like he just kind of sprinkles in Bitcoin, like it's like he just replaces the word gold with Bitcoin for
Right.
parts of it to just kind of, and I'm just like, God, this book is so bad, but it's super popular amongst the small blockers. So